Hey, everybody, thank you for being here. We're going to get started with introductions. My name is Karen Taylor, and I am the negotiations chair for EM.
Michelle Dunn, Secretary.
Julie Reno, Research.
Christine Berg, President.
Dave Marquardt, School Board.
Cassidy Bjorklund, School Board.
Brandon Lunix, Superintendent.
Kristen Damer, Assistant Superintendent.
Human Resources. Oh, sorry. Ashley Evans, Human Resources.
Cam Lingenbach, Director, Business Services.
Sarah Martin, Member Rights.
Jim McFarland, Vice President.
Any concerns with the minutes?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Other than I wanted to request, it's not a concern, we can sign them, but I was going to ask if going forward they can be shared with me and with Michelle. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay. So I'm just going to forewarn everybody. I'm going to do a lot of what I tell people they shouldn't do with students. And that's, I'm going to do a whole lot of talking. And if you have questions across the table, you can choose to hold them or you can break in it. It doesn't matter to me. I'll just go back to my notes and pick up where I left off. So whatever works best. So you should have a packet that Jim was gracious enough to bring around to you. So the first item that's on there is the MOU for extended time for elementary prep time. And so I struck out some language that had previously been in there and then added some specific folks rather than the I think at one point in time it said other staff, and then changed the verb will to may. And our thinking on this is that it allows some flexibility. Christy did some meeting with folks from the elementary level. And for instance, or for example, there might be an LSS staff who has scheduled time with students during that extended daytime, but then those are students that don't come early. This would give them the flexibility to move that if there are not students in the building, to move that to be prep time. That's what May allows for that. So that's really the only change to that document. And then I think, provided that's language that works okay for you, I think we're ready to sign that one. The next page is the online learning MOU. And last time when we met, the concern about the this MOU was there wasn't mention of mental health support or counseling for these students. So I did reach out to one of the high school counselors who just said that they are in agreement that with the current enrollment numbers, it makes sense for them to just divide them up by alphabet, the same that they do with others. They did have a couple of concerns, which I said that I would bring up. Not that we necessarily are going to have answers for these questions today, but just a couple of things. So when we had the program through Owatonna, they were sometimes approached for guidance about like graduation preparation. Like, are these students getting everything that Moorhead requires for graduation, et cetera? And they did not have access to Edgenuity. So they couldn't see what the students were enrolled in. They couldn't see what their current grades were and whether they were in jeopardy of passing, not passing. So a concern is to make sure that the counseling staff have access to what students are enrolled in Edgenuity. That was followed really closely by, but we don't want to be the ones to enroll them because they're not trained in Edgenuity. And they don't always know the ins and outs of, are they full-time enrolled? Are they in credit recovery? Which, because of the Minnesota High School League, if students are participating in extracurriculars, becomes really important. So in the past, when we had talked about that, it was David, who was probably going to still be taking care of the credit recovery. And Dave Lawrence was going to be the identified administrator for the full-time Moorhead Online Academy. Does that sound right? So they need access, but they don't want to be the entity that is in charge of enrolling students and making sure that they're correctly enrolled in the right places for things to work. And then just I think I mentioned this already, but if the district moves forward with this and decides that they're going to begin to offer the opportunity to students beyond Moorhead, so from the area around, at what point in time would it be a consideration to hire someone specifically to provide support for those students? If it begins to be, I think our cap right now was at around 80 students as a possibility. Should it become many more students than that? At what point, or at some point, it would seem like it just makes more sense to have some additional counseling support for folks. So with that in mind, I think that one is really close. So that's the online learning. And then the next document just said says at the top, Education Moorhead proposal. And this is pretty lengthy. I'm going to try to go through this pretty efficiently. What I did in setting this up, these are, originally I titled this minor language changes, but in some cases, the change is minor, but these are things that are important to people. So the first one, and they go in order according to the order of our contract. So Article 5, Section 2, posting of vacancies. President Berg does not feel like notice of vacancies need to be shared directly with the president because those are posted on the extranet when they become available. So it's just language that is struck for that one. Second one, Article 8, publication of the agreement, Section 1, copies of the contract. The team felt strongly that the only people it might be important, or it is important to have copies of the contract, which is the old language, would be people who are brand new to the contract. Sometimes people don't necessarily realize everything that's in the contract unless they see the physical document and identify that it's lengthy and it has different parts and et cetera. So we would like the language that's in there in italics says that printed ones would be distributed to those new to the teachers at new teacher initiation and within 30 days after the contract is signed. And then in addition to that, we had some feedback from membership that the teacher master agreement is a little tricky to find, requires a lot of clicking. So it says in there that the master agreement will be available for all those on the agreement through the link on My Demographics. And I know you don't like that kind of specific language, but that was the way that a lot of people felt like that's where you find the seniority list or the probationary list. So that would be a good place to link the contract as well, because then those two documents are adjacent. So I don't necessarily think that language needs to be in there, but I wanted to include it just to sort of push the idea forward. People kind of get accustomed to looking at that area for documents that are specific to them. So pay stubs and et cetera. So, item number 3, conformity to law, is purely just updating some dates. So that is in there. Item number 4, Article 12, policy review. So the revised school board policy doesn't match Article 12, Section 3, what it says in our contract for how many teachers can be on the policy review team. And so we would like to keep the number of representatives on that committee if possible. Courtney is the person who is part of cabinet for EM. And then ideally we'd have someone from secondary, someone from middle, someone from primary, and someone from special ed. So that would allow us to keep those. And then section 4 is a list of committees, and that's more just a question, are there vacancies on those committees that we should be fill over the course of the summer? Are those committees functioning? Are there any of them that it makes more sense to rename, et cetera, going forward? So that's more just an item to look at. Article 14, Section 1, teacher transfer policy. Mrs. Berg recently transferred from one building to another and brought forward that this does, like, what teachers who want to transfer into to another building, what they're asked to do doesn't match with the language that's in the contract. Do you want to speak more to that, Christine?
Yeah, it's just that it doesn't match like when I was going through the process of transferring, putting in the transfer request. It wasn't just a transfer request. I actually had to fill out a whole brand new application because there were some documents that they said would be available. There wouldn't be. It was just really, I didn't think I'd have to do a whole new application.
Did you have to just do an internal application or an external application?
The external, because I couldn't find the internal, and the other documents, like they said, would be, oh, that should already be in your file. I couldn't find it to then link into there, and so I just.
No,
This
this
was
would have
like a year ago.
This would have been last year. So I
Yeah.
would tell you this has been practice almost my entire time here, which is why we've adjusted some of the language, meaning we've always required internal application. We used to get an internal application and a teacher transfer document. We haven't received those teacher transfer documents for 5, 6 years maybe, because that has never been the process. So the other thing I guess I would say is we would want you to fill out an internal application. So if there's pieces to your application that you want us to find from your file, you have access to that, but maybe we can find it on the HR side.
Yeah, there were some things that it said to link, and I wasn't able to find them to link, and so I wasn't even sure if I had everything included that I was supposed to.
Yeah, we have to, I mean, really from an HR standpoint, they have to have an application on file. Even if you're with us, we require that across the board for
Yeah.
contracts. So
It just seemed it was a little more cumbersome than what it needed to be.
So maybe, it's just a language cleanup, and it probably makes the most sense for the process, whatever it's going to be, to come from HR so that it does represent what the actual expectation is. And then Appendix G is the teacher transfer procedure, and maybe we can have that one place or another. And Article 17, Section 2, individual teacher contracts. So the question, this might make more sense if you flip to the back page and look at the table that's on the back page. And so if you look at the rate and the time, there's 1 hour of prep time for elementary, a half block for any program at the high school, at the high school level has been an hour. And then a full block is 1.5. And partially a concern came up about this because if the choice is between subbing 2 half blocks and getting 2 hours compensation or time, financial or time, or taking a block and it being an hour and a half instead of 2 hours, people would take the half block. So, and then the other concern that sort of partners with that or goes hand in hand with that is that if people request an hour and a half of leave time, the belief is that it's rounded up to 2 hours. And so that is in there for that reason. Right after that appendix, there are some asterisks, and then it says this will also affect Appendix I. But there's some additional work on Appendix I that becomes a more complex situation. And so I didn't want to include Appendix I because in this document because that needs some more overhaul. So that'll be coming. There'll be more coming on that later on. Article 23, Section 4, seniority. And this, again, is purely an item for discussion. Currently, it says that the seniority list will be up to date September 1st, and that it will be available for people to look at, and that if there are additions or changes, that they should be to HR by September 1st. And then there are some challenge dates that are in there. And based on just the last few years when there have been some really late hires, I wondered if those are deadlines that need to be adjusted so that HR can actually deal with the accuracy of that and sharing it and posting updates and that sort of thing. And I don't know what's up with the funky October 10/25 and 15/30. If you look under, it's number D. See it looks like maybe we changed it from the 15th to the 30th. 15th just didn't get struck or something, but that's the way it was in the contract. So that one is more like I don't if it's working the way it's working, then but I just wondered if those were deadlines that should be adjusted, especially once we start school after Labor Day again, which is typically a little bit later. Article 26, Section 1. I just want to bring that to your attention. Course approval for lane changes. There has been a pretty significant change in practice for that. The language in the contract is fairly clear about expectations. What is difficult is the application of that language. So it's difficult for people to get access to coursework without paying an application fee and applying for a program. In actuality, that's not what their interest is. And so at times, we're asking people to take on an expense that is not going to serve them in the long run because they're not looking to get a degree. I also think, and we can work on this as EM, but sometimes people don't know what they don't know. So, for instance, I got an email message from Ben Melby, who's the university director of the writing project, saying, "Hey, if people take the summer institute, they can get 3 graduate credits and they can get a stipend for doing it. It's time consuming, but it's really good work." And you can get these 3 continuing ed credits. So I contacted Ben because I know him and I said, hey, are there any graduate programs at NDSU that these credits qualify for? And he said, oh, yeah, you can take them as number blah, blah, blah. And he gave me the numbers and said, yeah, you can do that. So I said, going forward, what might really help you to get people to join this program is if you advertise, you can take these for graduate level credits without applying to a program. Now, had I not done that myself, I used my writing project credits as elective credits in my program when I went through. But if I didn't have that knowledge, I wouldn't know to ask those questions. So I'm just wondering if there's communication, like, can we provide people with the questions to ask or that kind of thing? And to a certain extent, I don't know what I don't know. I mean, there's just one particular situation where I could help. So again, if we can continue to work on making that advancement more accessible for people, because I think our goal and the district goal is the same. We want people to improve as educators. And in some cases, it's hard for people to understand. Like I signed up for a course in suicide prevention. It's not worth a graduate credit. It's good. You can use it for continuing ed credit, but it's a continuing ed credit. So you can't use it for your master's degree. So I think just continuing to look for ways that we can smooth the path for people will be good. Article 34, teacher insurance benefits. Complete care or catalyze is missing in the benefits. We did have a few people who reached out and said, this has been a benefit that I've had access to. It's important for my family, but because it's not included with the other insurance benefits, I'm never quite sure that I'm going to have access to it going forward. So just to formalize that as something that's available to folks. And I don't know a whole lot about it because it's not something that I qualify for, but including that information. Article 35, Section 1, schedules, and Section 2, salary schedules. Purely dates that need to be amended for the new calendar or for the new contract. And then if you look right at the top of the next page, subdivision 2. This was actually something that I sort of stumbled across, and as many times as I've looked at this contract, I didn't really have a good awareness that it was there. Withholding of a salary increase, an individual teacher's advancement is subject to the right of the school district to hold increment lane changes or other for just cause and action. Withholding a salary increase shall be subject to the grievance procedure. In my experience, I don't think this has ever happened. And I was trying to, when I was talking with the team about it, we were trying to come up with a scenario that would make sense when this might happen. So is that something that,
Discipline. I think
Okay.
discipline is the only time it happens. So
okay, so it would be something that would possibly carry over from one year to the next for this step, or would it be a lane change might be,
a lane change, well, either it'd be if the decision was made, you might withhold the increment, the lane change, but specifically it's for just cause. I don't know that we've ever used the language since I've been here,
okay,
but that would be the reason for it generally.
okay,
I don't know that there'd be a general. I mean, to be honest, it's subject to the grievance procedure. So if we said no one's moving on January 1st, July 1st, we'd likely be grieving it and try to figure out why,
okay,
right?
okay.
So
Okay. Article 36 is another item for discussion. This is that early retirement that always creates confusion. We tried rewording it in this contract, and I still had people, and President Berg had people contacting her. I think Bonnie had somebody contact her as member rights and say, hey, can I get paid for my sick leave? Nope, not unless you were hired before 1990, blah, blah, blah. So Do you know how many people we still have on that?
We'll find the number.
Okay,
I was gonna say,
okay.
we likely have a general idea. It's not a lot, but we'll get the exact number when we come back.
Okay, because I just think it still creates confusion.
Yeah, we
for
had a
people, so
few retire this year, for
Okay.
example, so.
okay. So then Article 37 is association leave, and this likely occurs in other places, but President Berg said maybe we should change that to hours since we now have hourly leave. And I will say that just to be safe, I had Julie check my math, and I congratulated myself on being able to accurately use a calculator. But so that is changed to hours, and I don't know if we want to do that in other places, change number of days to number of hours, etc. And then Article 38 is just an update to ESST reasons. The addition to make funeral arrangements, attend a funeral service, or a memorial, or address financial or legal matters. I pulled that right from the guidance from the Department of Labor. So that's just the additional reason that now is possible for ESST. We made it. Yeah, that was only the first one. Okay. Then if you turn the page, the next one is quite a bit briefer and may just be an oversimplification. But we changed the salary schedule, and we had connected some items to cells in the salary schedule, thinking, oh, this will simplify things because then when the salary schedule changes, then it'll change for everybody. And then we changed the whole salary schedule. So it's just
Well, we really only changed a couple of steps, to be fair. So it's
Okay.
not like anyone went backwards because of it
right,
on that step.
right. So it's just this is just I don't know, a point of discussion, maybe. Like I don't expect a signature on this document. It's just, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, it's some of them specifically though are tied to cell like MA 30, 13,
Mhm.
which I mean now have to go to 14.
Yeah, give me an example.
Department chair is Appendix B.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Next page. This is the memorandum of understanding for flexible professional time. And there was some discussion about this last time. And in my mind, this is connected with the PLC MOU, though I didn't attach that to this. So at the last time that we met, we talked about the fact that there are not really flex days built into the calendar for next year. And the early dismissal option that was discussed is dependent on building or site administration. And so the concern is that there may be particular admin who will consistently keep staff. And they may even say, you know, like, I just want to have a quick staff meeting that goes from a half an hour to 45 minutes and then to an hour. And so this is a concern that's also specifically concerned or connected with the preservation of individual prep time. And sort of trying to hold that time as sacred time. And even at times when staff have been told you can choose to meet with your PLC time or not, if you're part of a PLC time and 3 people are meeting and you're the only person who isn't, you're not going to walk away from that feeling good about your participation in a team. And in fact, in the past, there have been people whose their evaluation has cited a lack of cooperation with their PLC time. with their PLC team. And that isn't specific to this reason, but it is something that's of concern. And there is already a certain amount of prep time that's lost due to consistent sub shortages. And I want to acknowledge right away that there's compensation for that. However, at the elementary level, there are not as many opportunities just because of the structure of their schedule for them to recoup or to be provided with compensation for full hours and et cetera. So we just want to make sure that there's we don't want to continue with a pattern of erosion to personal prep time. PLC time is spoken of in many locations at many meetings as the be all end all. And there's concern that if PLCs the work of PLCs is that important to the district, and if there has been a concerted effort at the 7-12 level to provide people with time during the contract day, during the contract year, to do the work of a PLC, that the same courtesy and respect should be extended to those people who work in PLCs at the K-6 level. And arguably, those who are working at the K-6 level are, even under questionable circumstances, already have the expectations for them that they are doing this work. They have study time for reading. In some places, there's been the addition of concerted time and regrouping of students, transitioning students for math as well. And I read a quote, don't know who it was, I could have looked it up, but I didn't, that said, you have a tendency to put your money where your priorities are. And that's what the K-6 staff is asking for. They don't want flexible time. They don't want to give up their personal prep time. They have a lot of other responsibilities. There's new literacy. There's implementation of letters. They want their personal prep time, and they want time in the scheduled contract day for PLCs. If this is work that's important, it needs to be a priority. And I know that that's challenging because there's a difference between what you can expect of a 15-year-old when they're not in school and what you can expect of a 7-year-old when they're not in school. That's a challenge that we have to accept in respect to the K-6 teachers. Connected with that, PLC, I don't want to skip this. We do also value the continued additional time for LSS staff for their paperwork, for assessments, etc. PLC meetings, in the last PLC MOU, there was identification of a stipend to go with approximately 1 hour of work outside the scheduled contract. PLC leaders have more than 1 hour of responsibilities on a month-to-month basis. They are often responsible for sharing information, for warehousing data, collecting data, for taking notes, minutes, for people who aren't there to report back to administrators. There are multiple monthly meetings, including MTSS, BLT, et cetera. And then also providing support for grade level team members who may be new to the district, or they may be moving from one grade to another grade and they're not as familiar with the assessments and the materials and et cetera. So those two things are kind of connected. So the final item that not quite final item, that I want to talk about is the MOU for student behavior and teacher safety. And I did provide a copy of that document in the packet. So the original purpose when we started talking about this was to begin to accurately and consistently collect data and to have data that we could look at in order to work on solving some of the behavior concerns. And so there was an add-on for Power School in order to get that started. And there were some guidelines that were laid down in the MOU. And when we started looking at that MOU for student behavior and teacher safety, first we identified that we have to continue to hold this as a priority. In our member survey, there were almost 60%, it was 58 point something percent of our members said that appropriate intervention for behavior continues to be a high priority, needs to remain a high priority. If we include those for whom it was a medium level priority, our percentage goes up to over 80%. So this continues to be an area of concern for our members. And I think there's safety, but there's also concern for the students themselves. And so part of what we also hoped for was that consistency, and what members report at site meetings is that that consistency is not necessarily happening. So in some buildings, the administrators made it a priority to go back to the documentations on paper that happened before the add-on for Power School was available. They went back and they put in all of the data that was on paper. In other buildings where maybe they have higher behavior concerns or they have more things to worry about, that data was never entered. And so specifically, there was one teacher who said, I have a student whose incidence should be 300% higher than they are. And basically, it looks like he started with a clean slate in October, and that's not true. There were consistent issues before that. So what's also true is that in the MOU, it says that there should be monthly sharing of data within the building. That happened in some places with consistency. At others, there was a quarterly email with information provided for people. There was not discussion with administration and the staff, et cetera. So just that consistency. And then at the district level, this is something that we were supposed to talk about at Meet and Confer. And I don't remember us ever looking at the data or talking about it at Meet and Confer. And that's as much on me as it is on anybody else. Because it just didn't happen. And I think it was Jim who said, hey, did we ever talk about this at Meet and Confer? I don't remember this. So the question is, a lot of what I heard when I went to buildings is, yes, now we're collecting information. Now we know we have this information, we have this data. What are we going to do with it? Like, what do we do to make it better? Like, who's going to look at it? What's our purpose for looking at it? What's our plan for moving forward? Just the collection of data in and of itself isn't going to change anything. So, like, I guess as a representative of Education Moorhead, I feel like this is a priority to move forward. I'm just not entirely certain that I know about all the pieces in order to be able to do that. But I think we have to figure that out. For the LSS MOU, I didn't include a copy of this, but I think I could, to a certain extent, repeat a lot of the concerns about that MOU that I shared about the student behavior teacher safety MOU. It was a bit of a struggle to get the data collection, the meeting, the collecting of information to get that up and running. I feel like it was pretty consistently, the meetings were happening toward the end. But again, people's questions at the building, the site team, or at the site meetings, the listening sessions was, we collected the data, what are we going to do with it? And so I guess that may be a question for somebody who's not in the room, because there's a program director who is like the first person to look at that information. And is there a plan? I know that Brandon or Dr. Lunick is meeting with a group, sort of a working group for DCD concerns for moving forward. Are there plans to put together other work groups to examine the data and figure out, like, how do we move forward? How do we improve things? But a lot of what I hear, again, through member rights and through site visits, is case managers are overwhelmed with the amount of their work that is reactive and while they are in crisis mode, rather than there being proactive planning for students that we know are going to be here next year. Like, they've been here for a while. They're not students who are just coming in. There are a few of those, but they're students who have been around. And so rather than a proactive approach using the data that was collected over the course of last year and the year before, how are we making proactive moves? Are there building spaces that were previously unsafe and unsecure for students that when we start the new year are going to be safe and going to be secure for students and adults, and appropriate placements to keep people safe? And then, sort of as a connected issue, we have the related service providers, SLPs, OT, PT, who are part of the teacher master agreement. And these are people whose caseloads have grown and grown and grown and grown. And I have some really specific information for one of those groups, but I just wanted to bring this up as an issue today to talk about some possibilities. Like, what are some ways that we can reward people for choosing to stay here? Because specifically for speech language pathologists, I know that contracting someone from outside the district costs the district $150,000. Whereas my understanding is that the bill for me as a teacher sitting in the lower right-hand corner, I'm about as expensive as they get, is around $136,000. So moving forward, if we're really looking closely, if we're scrutinizing money, if we're scrutinizing how we spend money and how we expend, I don't think we should be looking at contracting out for these people. We need to have our own, because I think that's how we get better service for our students as well. That's how we get better care for the kids that are attending Moorhead schools. So, is it in the form of a longevity bonus? Is it a sign-on bonus? And I know that we are limited by some things that don't apply to our colleagues across the river in Fargo and West Fargo schools. But I don't think we're getting many people who are applying for those positions in our district, and there's a reason. So we have to try to figure out something around that. MA billing is part of that. And we have in the past negotiated compensation for those who are doing MA billing. If memory serves, you get, if you are someone eligible to do MA billing, you get $1,000 stipend the first semester, $1,000 the second semester, and then there's a separate amount for summer school. What I came to find out is it doesn't matter whether you have done 300 instances of MA billing or you have done 3. Your compensation is the same. And if there are people who are only doing 3 instances of MA billing, arguably, I mean, I know because I was the person who argued about this. Those are people who are bringing money into the district. Their work is bringing money into the district. And if we are carefully scrutinizing funding and sources of funding, if we're adding an extended day program as a way to bring in additional funding, how can there be people who are taking home $2,000 a year for billing and never doing it? So I don't really know how to do something about that because I don't have access to the data, but my understanding is that that's a matter of looking at a platform that Dwayne Borgeson has access to.
I would just say I do have some of that data on hand.
Okay.
That so we could share that in a generalized fashion. But to your point, there are some individuals who are very, very good about MA billing and understand the importance and the documentation of it. And some others never do it. And it's single digits in that group, but there are some groups who do it far, who do that billing at a far greater level. So
Okay.
I can look at how to that some of that data has been provided to me.
So, and then, then I think along with that is in some cases, people are not directly responsible for MA billing. Like they don't do it themselves, but it's their license, their professional license, and their experience, and et cetera, that allows that MA billing to be documented. And so, like the supervision, the responsibility of doing that for others, I think is also kind of something important to think about, especially if I heard a rumor that there might be SLPAs, in which case I think that would be more necessary. But again, it seems like if we're scrutinizing funding sources, that is one that if we have people who are eligible and there's billing isn't happening, the documentation. I'm almost finished. Appendix C is the extracurricular schedule, and that schedule matches the format of our regular schedule. And so I wondered if just for alleviating confusion, do we want to reformat the extracurricular schedule so that it looks the same? For instance, the extracurricular schedule has a step 0 and only goes to step 13, that sort of thing. So if that's something that we want to bite off, and maybe that would involve a conversation with Dean about, like, how does it make sense to do that? What language? We have a certain number of coaches who are not teachers, so we also want to make sure that that makes sense to them. So that's, and then the final item that I have today is. Ever since I started negotiating far too long ago, improving, getting the Jumpstart teachers, ECFE, ABE teachers closer to the full contract and less limited by Article 45. There's a Jumpstart MOU right now, but moving them closer to the full contract and access to the same rights and benefits of the other licensed staff has been something that we have chipped away at. And so I just want to make sure that we keep that as a joint priority.
You talk about MOU class size, SLP.
I talked about the LSS, the MOU. I talked about the class size. I said, like, how are we going to move forward?
Please do that.
Sorry. You were still tapping, so I thought you were keeping up. Sorry. Yes. And then the SLPs, OTs, PTs, like how do we make their workload more reasonable, and how do we stay more competitive? How do we make sure that the people who are doing MA billing are the ones who are being compensated? Mrs. Berg, you look like there's something you want to say.
Going back to the class size MOU, do we mention about how we want to, looking how adding in like maybe middle school class sizes because just K4 right now.
I have a couple questions for the flexible prep time or professional time, sorry. So is the ask for K6 to remove PLC from the instructional, like student time, like that their student contact time? That
So currently, what's happening is they're being asked to meet, I think it's on Wednesdays in most schools, they're being asked to meet during their personal prep time in order to do their PLC work, to look at data, to attend meetings, et cetera. And what they're asking for. So at the 712 level, 7-8 has what's called collaborative time built into their schedule for team planning, bar team planning, or for PLC work. At the high school, all PLCs meet on Wednesday mornings during contract time. They just don't have students in their space during that time. And so what we're asking for is, like, at 712, nobody's required to give up their personal their prep time in order to do their PLC work. At the K6 level, the ask is that people do it during their personal prep time and they record it as flex time outside the school day. The issue with that is that in our calendar next year, the last day that we have students is the 183rd day, though Kristen has something here that I think probably speaks to that. So the concern was, well, if there are not flex days built in, and people are being told, like, you can use flex time for the early dismissal days that are on the calendar. There are some administrators, like, people just say, like, we're never going to get out of there. Like, if I plan to use 3 hours of flex time so that I can fly out for Thanksgiving, that time there's going to be a staff meeting, there's going to be an MTSS meeting, there's going to be something.
Mhm.
So
So the ask is to remove it from the hours of student contact time, right? So outside of those hours, right?
Correct.
That's the ask.
correct.
And then is a weekly PLC necessary still, you think, or would it be a biweekly one be beneficial, or would it be weekly still?
I don't, like high school?
No, elementary.
No,
That's what
at
we're
the
talking is the
elementary level.
K6 level.
Sarah, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can say, excuse me, I think most buildings are being asked to do weekly still at this point.
Yep.
But there is some variance between buildings.
So do you think it's still a benefit to do it weekly, or as on your side is it you think it's more beneficial to maybe do it every other week or different times?
I don't know that I'm equipped to answer that question at this point.
So I'm just curious if it's still, I know it's been a lot of changes with PLCs throughout other districts, and just wondering if it's beneficial still to have it every week, or if it is great. If not, maybe look at different how that looks.
I think
as well.
I think the effort is to do to look at assessment data and to identify whether kids are making progress forward in the group that they're in for study time, or whether there should be an adjustment to their intervention. So there, I mean, ideally, there's progress monitoring that's happening, and students who have or are struggling with a similar skill or similar knowledge set of knowledge are placed together. So there are students transition during a day. They go to a different teacher for that that time.
I would add to, some buildings are a little further along with the Spuddy math piece. And so adding that making that PLC weekly is helping talk about both literacy and giving time to math as well in those groups where we're shifting students and people are trying to find where's the best spot for that student with their skill level that we're working on and targeting for them.
Sure. Okay.
Can I make just a comment? I think you're not asking for PLC outside of the contract day. You're asking that the elementary has their PLC within the contract day. Okay.
Yeah.
That clarification.
And not during their personal prep time.
Is that a majority of elementary who are saying they don't like the existing practice, or is there individuals who are just struggling because?
Generally speaking, the response is that it's really, I think there's been a lot thrown at people in the last couple of years. So if we think about the elementary, they did letters training, and they need to incorporate letters into literacy. There's a new literacy curriculum, and there were pilots, but overall it's new curriculum for people, especially if they're moving grade level. And literacy is a large part of the day. And then the Spuddy time is also literacy based. And so those are changes that they're trying to adapt to already. And overall, what we're hearing from people is it is really difficult to be told you need to come to this meeting on Wednesday and focus on what we tell you to focus on, rather than focusing on what you believe is best for your kids in like between today and tomorrow, because it's during your prep time. And there are some people who will give and give and give and give of their time. Like if you think about elementary teachers, you know that there are some of them in their cars in the parking lot at 6:30 a.m. and it's still there at 3:30 p.m. and it's not because they're teaching Excel or directing the play. It's because they are there trying to figure out what's best for every kid. And so the number of changes and the number of learning curves, I forgot to mention there's also a new assessment platform at that level. So looking at data differently is also part of that. So what people are asking for is hold my personal prep time sacred so that I can prepare for everything else, and give me time outside of my personal prep time so that I can look at data and prepare for Spuddy time or for math time if that's already happening in my building. Does that make more sense?
Yep. Okay, so I know Dave may have more questions, but this is relevant, so I want to make sure that it's shared. So this is the calendar. Brandon counted them, Jeremy counted them, Kristen counted them, and we all counted them together. There is a day on June 1st, which would be considered a flex day. Our last day with students is the day of graduation. Understandably, that looks different between K-8 and 9-12, and we do have the early outs. To the question of holding those sacred, I think one of the questions we've talked about with early outs is that, my principal may want to have a staff meeting, your principal may not. I don't know that we'll ever fix that. In fact, we chuckled about it before we walked in. But I think if we were to say that is flex time to be held sacred, you can't have a meeting, that is something we have the ability to do. And if someone doesn't follow that, we have a different remedy. But just so that we note that, June 1st is a flex day technically. And if not a flex day, then it's work day. Dave, did you have more questions?
I do not right now.
One point on the contract, why it's listed in your packet as 15:30 and 10:25 is because it's also listed like that in the contract. So I'm going to assume that if we're starting late, can we just use September 30th and October 25th
That probably makes.
as the dates? Is that all right with you?
Well, I think it's that question when I was asking it is more. I know a couple of years ago we talked about the need to move. I think it was the fall lane change, just because in HR things are super, super busy at the beginning of the year because of late hires, because of, and that's everybody, not just teachers, but it's everybody. So just bumping that deadline back so that it would be less ridiculous to try to meet it and less stressful for the people who are doing the work. So that same thing for the seniority list. Like, does it make sense just to push it back a little bit? And I don't know that that's I mean, I think, as I said, I think it probably is a question that's more for the people who have to do the work. Does it make sense just to push that back?
Yeah, it just says the dates. I figured if we took the latest one and each month, it'd be all right.
It was either a previous error that we missed, or we had a couple errors with people having access to contracts on the front end of the year that we were trying to fix.
Or would it be better if we said last Friday each month? Then you're not held to a date, you're just held to that last Friday. Or I don't really care, because it's,
I don't know. I mean, I think, and Mrs. Berg could, President Berg can speak to this if she sees it differently. But I think what people are concerned about is they want to know, when should I be looking for the accurate list? And then, where is it? Where can I find the one that says I'm number one, I'm number two, I'm number three, rather than, like, I think my number is 1,200, something like that, which doesn't really mean anything to me. So I think just the accuracy and the availability is kind of what people are looking for. And so
I just have a question with the calendar. So what changed from the calendar that we had to this? Because on here we didn't have June 1st, but here we do. So I'm just
It's-
wondering what changed.
Well, it's not listed as a flex day. We didn't list the flex day in the document because we didn't have a flex time MOU, so nothing was listed. It's still a staff work day though, because that's day 183. So I understand how that's confusing. I think we understand but we went through month by month. Jeremy's department has the PD days, the student contact days, the communication days. I don't know that he usually shares that with your team or not, but they track that. So we counted all days by month. It's just not listed on the calendar as a flex day because we didn't have an MOU done.
at one point in time, that bi-level calendar was released at the same time that the official calendar was released. It was like a second page type thing. But I honestly, I think maybe it was when Pam Gibb left that it stopped being that second page document. And it is like, it's super confusing. It's I should say, it's really, really helpful if you have someone who starts late in the contract to have that detailed calendar, because then you identify that you say you were gone a day in September, you missed the daytime hours, but you also missed the open house at your school. And so having that calendar that lays out specifically how many hours are involved in those days is really helpful for people if they're trying to calculate, like, how many not how many days did I lose because of starting late, but how many hours did I lose because of starting late. So it is really helpful to have it as a second page or an attachment. The last few years, Dr. Larson has just shared it with me. I don't know that it's been posted.
Yeah, I don't, it would be an internal document, so we can find a place to post that in particular, but I know it's done. So I think your concern, Julie, is it's not marked on the calendar as anything, June 1st.
Right. So when I counted, like, 183 days were accounted for on the version that I'm looking for from 4/25/25. There were 183 days accounted for. So if we now have June 1st, I don't know where the other day went.
It's all broken down right there, and I pulled those two others from Jeremy's document. We counted by days, half days, conference days. We went through the calendar multiple times. So that day is after. I don't know. Maybe we need to sit down together, Julie, but we counted it multiple times. So I don't know where the extra day is that you're getting. We've got them counted out by month, so maybe you need to let me know where the month is that we have different days.
Okay,
might
that
be
sounds
helpful.
good.
Yeah. Okay, so on our side, and I'm going to say likely we're going to need to caucus after this, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to come back with anything specific with the extent of just to be able to check in,
Okay.
because there's a lot here, which is fine and great, and we'll talk about that. But so I handed out for our team district language proposal, and some of these, this isn't everything. I'm going to maybe make the suggestion that on some of these, Karen and I sit down and do a joint document that is some of the cleanup in particular. Some of these may need to get pulled out as standalone or specific. And maybe we can better identify that. The majority of this one we present to you today might be, so like posting of vacancies, which I think you referenced as well. It's not the process we use anymore. We utilize the website or extranet. We generally don't do paper copies. Christine ran into that, I think, with us earlier this year. They are generally posted on the extranet. So school year, we've talked about this before and not changing those days, but we'll look to maybe say up to 177 days because we haven't been to 177 days. I don't know the entire time that I've worked for the school district. So to have some flexibility in those contract days, which is generally what happens, it's within the 183. So something to discuss. And then in that school year too, that we've got old dates that aren't relevant. What doesn't change the meaning of the language we should look at removing. I've got an example there for EIS. We know EIS's calendar runs July 1st through June 30th. We don't need the old language anymore because it doesn't add meaning to that language. Looking at the master contract execution, again, and I don't know that we've ever had 3 copies. We've always had 2 copies. Generally, one is kept district office in the HR side, and one is provided to education Moorhead. So looking at streamlining that, because generally what's going to happen with the school board is it's going to sit with Deb and Brandon's office, and you're going to have one in the HR office, and we have it all electronically at this point as well. So if we could look at that language. And then some of the other language that I won't go through specifically, but is in some of the, in the majority of the contract, it says superintendent or designee. And a couple of these pieces of language, it just says superintendent. And in reality, it might be the acting department's job, mostly on the human resources side. So looking at adding or designee where that doesn't exist. And then like a sabbatical leave, changing from director of to department of, just so as if positions ever change, that it doesn't change the meaning of the language. And then just a general proposal, and these are not exhaustive. So I think going through and looking at some of those dates in particular, which I think would be helpful if we could do to come back with some of that general language. But then also to change all gendered language to gender neutral language, which we've done in the majority of the contracts up to this point. So anything that says his, hers, or he, him gets changed to they, them, just generically. And then again, remove dates that are irrelevant and propose that we work together to do so. And then of course I mixed up Appendix D and Appendix B totally unintentionally, but just know that it's fixed in the minutes. When we're talking about third-party billing and changing to some of those some of the contract rates, that'll be Appendix B. So just note that it's on our radar as well. Nothing specific today, just that we've started talking about, if there's additions, subtractions, or revisions to that appendix, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it. We do have additions to Appendix D, some new activities, such as Future Farmers of America and HOSA, which is, Ashley might have the acronyms in there, and FCCLA, which is a facts-based organization. So some of those we'll add. So we'll start that process the next time we meet. And then there's some revisions to existing activities at the middle school level, which I think we've seen consistently over our time here where things just kind of change shape. They did come to us earlier this year and say, hey, we're not using these like they're supposed to be. And we said, well, why don't you see if you can? Things that had either been taken in by another kind of activity, which we don't love, or can you take it back and say, hey, we've got a newspaper. What should we be doing with it? So Corey at the middle school is doing a good job with that. And then we also want to have a conversation about Appendix B. And I'll turn that over to Ashley just to give you a brief summary on. Oh, sorry.
I was like, I'm not
too many appendices. Sorry. Appendix I.
And I don't really have anything formal. It's just kind of the things that we're running into with trade time. And I think it's impacting teachers as well. So the way the process kind of works right now is each building has a spreadsheet on the administrative assistant side. And when that trade time is happening, they're documenting those hours. And the default is that it goes to being paid for that time. And sometimes there's a miscommunication where a teacher thinks that they're going to be given trade time for it. It gets documented as the default, and then they're paid out for it. And then later it comes back as, oh, I wanted that trade time. So there's, that tracking piece of it, some miscommunication pieces, and then also running into, say, someone enters their personal time, and probably because, they want to be able to meet that or get ahead of that personal leave max. And then once they've accrued the trade time, come back and ask that we flip flop that time, which it sounds like an easy push of the button too, but it's really like, especially if payroll's already been involved, those types of things, it's going into the systems multiple times, and it's also creating additional work on a teacher's end to make that phone call, have the discussion, explain it. There's been many times where it's like, hey, is it easier, or I'll get the call, can I just call and explain the situation to you? And then we're going through that process. So I don't know, as far as if we can simplify it or just kind of having some ideas on how we can make the process better so that people are getting their time and what that looks like. Those are just some of the challenges that I'm seeing from both sides.
While you were talking, it just occurred to me there was something with regard to flex time we talked about, and I forgot to say, which was if the flex time is those early dismissal days, and for instance, like I think Thanksgiving, right before the Thanksgiving break is one of those times. What if I haven't built up 3 hours of time? Would I still be able to take that? There was concern about people taking the flex time when they haven't documented like that timeline for that part of it. But that was just a minor detail that popped into my head when you were talking about people taking time, hoping that they're going to earn it coming up. So realistically, we have 45 minutes before our deadline. And then, yep, there is a lot, which is a lot for next time too. Sorry. Um, so, do we want to check back in a half an hour just to see how it's going, or what were you kind of thinking that we check in formally at the end time just to adjourn, to clarify questions?
Let me ask our team at the table, are there any concerns with extended time, the updates to the extended time and the online learning, and are we ready to sign those as they're written? There was very minimal change to online. I think you changed pre-K to K-12.
I think it was 712.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
7-12.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then it was the addition of certain positions may be asked to do their prep time during that extended time. And what was added was learning resource strategists, LSS staff, ELML instructors, instructional strategists, and interventions, which doesn't say they have to, but say they may. Any concerns? Okay.
There isn't any we missed in there, is there?
I didn't slide something in, did you?
I can't speak to what you missed, Brandon. Sorry.
The only other thing would be that we do have some dates that we could add, and we could share those and email those as a part of the record. You could tell me with your team if they work. I don't know that it makes sense if we can sign off on these two right now that we come back to the table, or that we just let these fine people move on with their day and we take our time to have a conversation. Not that I think you wouldn't.
Anybody on the team opposed?
Signing of the two.
Yep.
Extended time, prep, and the online learning.
Correct. I would say too, I would guess we'll be meeting for the next 45 minutes. So if we wanted to poll individuals to have a conversation, we could do that.
Everybody sticking around.
I would assume so.
Okay.
Good morning.
Harbor to the north.
Especially since I'm sitting.
Yeah, no,
Go.
no, nope, not at all. We need honey.
I think I still need to sign this one.
No, this is the one. You already. Oh my gosh, never mind. Thank you for being smarter than I. Yeah.
Faster than
Yeah.
crying when you.
Oh, got to hyperventilate. Like, where's Barbara versus Snicker?
All right, anything else?
So are you sending us the dates?
We'll send you dates.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
We are adjourning.